coming today. We appreciate you coming to our second Tuesday Lunch and Learn this month. What a wonderful crowd. We so appreciate you. I'm Judy Casey, the Library Director, and this program is put on by the Friends of the Rogers Public Library. They sponsored this program, started a few years ago, and so this is an exciting event for us today. Actually, I want to give credit to Leslie Canarian. She has been trying to get a tea in the library for the last 5 years. So I appreciate that. I did want to let you know, those of you that are regulars saw that we didn't have handouts for next month. The Audubon Society was supposed to be here next month, and they just called and said they cannot be here. So I will send out emails, and we will have the ad in the paper. We'll also have it on our website just as soon. We've got a couple of possible alternatives for next month. So sorry, we try to let you know that the month before. But you didn't come to listen to me today. Let me give you just a little explanation and introduce our guest speaker today. This is BJ McGuffey. I'm saying it right. McGuffey. I knew I'd do that. Today, and he is an apprentice with the Tea Master, and he is manager of Savoy Tea. And so he's coming today, and what BJ is going to do for us, he's going to steep samples of teas, and you're going to get a chance to come up and taste. It's not a full tea, so there's still plenty to drink back in the back. For those of you that really are tea lovers, Leslie brought some peppermint tea in the blue pot back there. If you don't want coffee or iced tea or water or lemonade. So there will be that, but he's going to give you some history and explanations of tea before you actually taste and sample your teas. And then he'll have you come up. We have some cups and tea steeping in hot water here at the front that you will have a chance to do that. Once again, thank you so very much for coming today. We are so glad you're here. This program goes from September through May every year on the second Tuesday at 12 noon. So I see several faces that don't normally come. I will get a notebook or a tablet, and if you are not on the email list and would like to know the subject matters, I will put you on the email list. And then we are printing more of the handouts, and when you get ready to leave, we'll have those of you that did not get one and like one, we will have one for you that you can pick up on your way out. Again, thank you for coming. And BJ?
Real quick before I start, if you haven't got a handout, we have some handouts over on the table. It'll have a lot of useful information in there. So, alrighty. So, as I was introduced, I am BJ. I work at Savoy Tea Company. We are a specialty tea company in Northwest Arkansas. The owners started it about 4 years ago. Their names are Bill and Tina Fire. Bill is a certified tea master under the International Institution of Tea. It's a really big deal. There's only about 150 worldwide. A lot of training goes into that. So I'm here today to teach you probably more about tea than you probably thought existed. So just real quick, if you guys are all looking at your handout, we'll get started. All right, so here my first title is One Plant to Rule Them All, which is my Napoleon Reference. So that's referring to the tea plant. All tea comes from the same exact plant. That plant is called Camellia sinensis. The way you get the different types of tea all comes from the way you process those leaves. So let's see here, what are these? The different types of tea that we have. Some of the main types are white tea, green tea, black tea, and herbals, as well as a dark tea, which is called pu'er. Pu'er. So pu'er is a fermented tea, which I'll get to that later. But for now, what I'll talk about is the different processes that go into making the different types of tea. So what gives you the different types of tea is all on oxidation level. The oxidation process comes through crushing the leaves. It's very similar to when you cut into an apple and it starts to turn brown. The same effect happens with tea. When you crush those leaves, they start to color and to turn green and then black. That's how you get the different types of tea. Beyond that, another thing that affects tea greatly is something that's called the terroir, which is originally a French term that refers to the way wine is produced. But it's also used in tea. And terroir is really the surrounding area, culture, and the way that the culture perceives tea can affect the terroir, as well as weather can affect it as well. And all of that goes into affecting the overall flavor of the tea that you're drinking. So, all right, and then this next slide, as you can see, I have another funny book reference, Around the World in 80 Days. And so to talk a little bit more about Camellia sinensis, Camellia sinensis is a tropical and subtropical plant. It's mainly grown in the eastern side of Asia. The 5 major producing countries and kind of the countries of origin are China, Japan, India, Sri Lanka, and Taiwan. It's said that tea was first discovered in China during the Shang Dynasty. The emperor of that time was boiling water, and apparently leaves fell into the water, and he decided to drink it, and voila, tea was discovered. But that's kind of the legend behind it. No one's exactly sure how it got discovered or who exactly discovered tea. But from there, tea has a very vast and rich history all through the Oriental culture. There's many different legends and stories that go behind different teas. For example, there is a black tea that comes from southern China, and it's referred to as a monkey pigs tea. And the legend is that Shaolin monks noticed that there were tea plants growing on top of a mountain, and so they trained monkeys to go climb up the mountain and pick the tea. And so it's just kind of little funny stories like that you'll hear when you really dive into tea. So, but there you have it. So that's really that's where you're mainly going to find tea, and where it comes from is from those countries. Other countries around the world do grow tea. Just in smaller quantities most of the time. We do grow tea in America, or it's been attempted. It doesn't really turn out that great just because we don't have the best conditions for it. Yeah, so that is that. All right, and so from your cup, from the farm to your cup. So tea goes through a lot just to get to your cup. Something I explained earlier was the terroir, and that's something that you have to really set up really well, which is you have to set up a good soil and a good area that's going to get lots of rain, lots of sunlight, and all of that effect is the beginning stages of affecting that final cup of tea. From there, you have the processes, which I mentioned earlier, which depict what type of tea it'll be. So all tea is processed. It all goes through a withering process, which with the withering, what they're doing is they're removing moisture from the tea leaf to get to where it's pliable, where they can touch it and roll it and do what they must with it without the leaf breaking apart. From there, they go, after they weather it, they do a process called crush and roll. And what they can do it either by hand or with machines. And what that does is, like I explained earlier, it oxidizes it. It increases the caffeine level. And then to stop the oxidation process, they do what's called firing the tea. And they put the tea over heat. And that stops the oxidation from happening. So for example, with green tea, they'll crush and roll it and only let it set and oxidize for about an hour. And then they'll put it under direct heat, and that stops the oxidation process, thus having green tea. Whereas if you let it keep going past that time, it'll turn black at dark, and that'll be black tea. There's actually a funny story behind how black tea got started. So the Chinese their traditional tea is green tea. And one of the reasons being is that since the discovery of tea, green is kind of a fresh color. It looks ripe, it looks edible, whereas black would be, you would think, oh, this is bad, it's spoiled, whatever. And so the way black tea kind of got, the story behind it, of how it got started is when the British were in China, they were asking if the Chinese could give them tea to take back home with them. Well, somebody didn't stop the oxidation process on whatever batch of tea they were making, and thus turning it black. And so they thought, well, instead of throwing it away, we'll just give it to the British. And so the British take the tea, and probably several years later, they come back to China and they say, hey, we'd like some more of that black tea that you gave us. And they're like, black tea, what are you talking about? And so that's kind of a funny story of how black tea got started. But anyway, so you have the way you grow the plant. I did not talk about plucking the leaves, so there's actually even part of the process of making tea goes into the way you pluck the leaves from the plant, and also what part of the plant you're plucking the leaves. There's what's called a picking order, and there's a tea master that overlooks the garden, and they decide, you know, today's a good day to pick leaves, and we're going to be picking these types of leaves off the plant. And so that also affects, of course, the way you process the leaves and whatnot. The final thing with tea is the way you steep it. And that obviously affects the cup of tea that you're drinking dramatically. A lot of people think to just pour boiling water over tea, and what usually happens with that is it scorches the leaves, and that's why a lot of tea is bitter or kind of sour. So there's actually a specific type of temperature that you want to use, depending on the type of tea you're steeping, as well as a certain amount of time you want to allow it to steep. I think it's on your back page. Second to the last page, I have all kind of the instructions of it and stuff on how to steep tea, if you want to turn there. This first part is talking about the agony of the leaf. In China, they call it the agony of the leaf as they're steeping it in the water. The agony is the leaf opening up and giving off its flavor, which is kind of a cool thing, more of a philosophical thing to think about when you're drinking tea. But kind of the overall general idea with tea is the darker the tea leaf is, the hotter you want the water and the longer you want to steep it. And then of course it's reverse that if the leaf is light. At the bottom here we have a kind of a general kind of what temperature you want, how long you want to steep different types of tea. For example, with white tea, you want to use roughly 175 degree water and steep it for about 2 minutes, which of course everyone has their own preference on tea. Some people like it stronger or lighter, and so on and so forth. But of course, that dramatically affects the cup of tea you're having. And then finally, why drink tea? there's many reasons why you should drink tea. It's extremely rich in history, as I kind of explained some. There's many different things that go into the history of tea and just different things that happened with it and how certain teas got discovered. It's very lavish in tradition. When you really dive into tea, you discover that there's many different ways to steep tea and to enjoy it. There's different ways that they steep tea in China and Japan and even in England. And then of course in America we have our ways of steeping tea. So it's really interesting to see the different traditions that go into it and what have you. Tea is also extremely fun and social. I mean, here we have a big group of 40-odd people, and so, which is a lot of people. Something I love doing is sharing tea with people, whether it be in a setting like this, in a class that I'm doing, or whether it be with friends or family. Tea is very fun to enjoy with others. It's very therapeutic. A lot of people, we actually have a therapist come in our store, and he buys glass teapots from us, and he has his patients watch tea unfurl and open up as kind of part of their therapy. And it's very relaxing, it's very calming. The whole process really of steeping tea is very calming, from boiling the water to getting it to the right temperature, to pouring it over the leaves. It's just all very calming and very soothing. Good way to start the day. And tea is also very healthy. And if you see on the very last page, there's a long description of all the different, some of the main chemicals and stuff that are naturally found in tea, which I'll talk a little bit about them. One of the biggest things that really differentiates different types of tea is the caffeine level, which you can find a small graph on the bottom there. Caffeine, the different types of caffeine levels is really interesting, especially whenever you look at the other aspects of tea and how it all works together. But caffeine obviously gives energy, it's a stimulant. Black tea has the most amount of caffeine. It has about half of the amount of coffee. Green tea has roughly about half the amount of black, and then of course you go down to decaf, which white tea also falls under that category, and then herbal tea has 0. Which, fun fact, herbal tea is an incorrect term because for something to be called tea, it has to have Camellia sinensis in it. So therefore, if it doesn't have that plant, it can't be called tea. So in the tea world, we call it a term called tea sane. And so anything that you steep, like you would tea, but doesn't have tea leaves in it, you would call a tea sane or an herbal, and so that's kind of a cool thing. Something my boss would probably be mad if I didn't make a point out. Just because that's something that is important when you're looking at tea. But anyway, so some of the health benefits of tea, it's extremely high in antioxidants, which really helps with a lot of different things, keeps your immune system built up. It helps with fight against heart disease, really helps restore cells in the body tissue. You also have flavonoids, which helps a lot with helping your brain focus on things. It also helps with different functions the body has, like the nervous system, and we also have theanes, which is an amino acid, and that really helps reduce stress. It helps, that's kind of the calming aspect of tea, which is really interesting because it also has caffeine. So tea is really cool because it has all these different things in it that hit different parts of your body, but it all comes together and It helps you be able to focus better. And like I said, it helps build your immune system overall. So, and that concludes my slideshow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pass around a tea, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it while I steep it. So I'll start it right here. And if you just want to look at the tea leaves, so this tea is called Gunpowder. It is a, yeah, definitely smell it. That's always a good thing to do. It's a kind of a traditional Chinese green tea. It's very common in China. It's the one I brought today is a very, very high grade of the Gunpowder. It's hand rolled. A way that you can tell that it's a high grade is the leaves will be kind of shiny, kind of have more of a shine to it, which is really interesting holding a high grade and a low grade together, because there is a big difference in kind of the shininess aspect of the leaf. But anyway, so yeah, that tea is kind of, I thought I'd bring just because it's a standard Chinese green tea. It's one of my favorite kind of daily teas to drink. So I'm actually going to make this right now. I'll try to talk while I'm making it. So when you're making tea, like I had mentioned earlier, a lot of things go into it, as well as the amount of tea that you use to steep. We always recommend at Savoy a teaspoon of tea per 8 ounces of water. And so what I'm going to do is probably make about 32 ounces of this. And then here I brought with me today as well an electric kettle, and these are really great. You're able to set the temperature with it, which is really nice, and then it will bring it to that temperature and hold it for up to an hour. So these are really cool. But anyway, so this shouldn't take too long. It should just take a couple minutes. But what I'm going to do with this tea is I'm going to steep it in water that's 175 degrees, and we're going to steep it for about 1 minute to 2 minutes. So while we're waiting for this, yeah.
On the taro tea,
Yeah.
it's interesting to see that the soil and the region is also the 7 to 10 days of the
Yes, that's also an important part.
I missed that. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. So he said on the terroir, he thought it was interesting that the days leading up to picking the leaves off the tea bush, affect the terroir. So the reason why that affects the terroir because the tea leaf is very sensitive to the weather. So depending on what tea it is and what region it is, you may not want very much rain. And if it rains a lot through those 7 to 10 days, they may say we can't pick it yet. We need to wait till it's drier, sort of thing.
But there's actually only three days of when the leaves should be picked. It says there's 7 to 10 days of leaves on the bush.
Yes. Yeah, so that's talking about, so the leaves will grow after the winter on the bush. It usually takes about 7 to 10 days. And then you pick the leaves. They try to get them within the next 3 days. And then after that, it takes another 7 to 10 days for the leaves to regrow, and then they pick them again. And that's kind of the process behind that. So.
You're talking just about the tops that are harvested.
Yes, yeah, good point. Yeah, so the tea plant, the part that they harvest and they use is the very top of it, where the buds start to sprout. The rest of the plant doesn't really produce that great of a tea. So
What do they do with that?
they just kind of leave it and let it grow up, or they'll prune it, depending on what type of tea it is. There are some gardens that have tea plants that have grown into a big tree and have been standing there for hundreds of years that they produce tea from. So, but yeah, let's open this up to questions. So
Yeah, this is very labor intensive.
it is.
I'm assuming that people don't get paid much or we can't.
It depends. There are some let me repeat your question real quick. So she said it was seems labor intensive and that the people picking the teas at the farms probably don't get paid very much. Otherwise, it might be very profitable. So it depends on what farm, what estate it's picked from. There are some estates that don't pay their employees very well, but there are some that do and treat them very well. And working at those places is seen as prestigious and having a good job to have. But yeah, it just depends. It's kind of, you know, with a lot of different jobs out there. It just depends on where you're at. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Where is your shop located?
Oh, where's my shop located? We have 2 locations. We have one here in Rogers, over at the Pinnacle Hills Mall. We're right next to the Gordon's Jewelry, and then we also have one in Fayetteville in the downtown area. So, all right. Any other questions? Yes.
How is tea decaffeinated, and does that affect the health properties of the tea?
Yes, that's a very good question. So, how is tea decaffeinated? So there are 2 ways to decaffeinate tea. One of them is unnatural. They'll spray chemicals on it, and it absorbs the caffeine out of it. In fact, most tea that you buy at the store is decaffeinated in that way. The second way is a natural way to decaffeinate tea, and they actually bake the tea. Bake the tea, and it bakes the caffeine out. Obviously, the first one will traumatically affect the health benefits of tea, whereas the second, all it does is it does reduce a little bit of the antioxidants, but not by much. It's mainly affecting the caffeine level. So that was a good question.
Do they have to mark on the box?
If it's decaffeinated or how it's decaffeinated, I am not sure. I haven't. I don't think I've bought tea at a grocery store in quite a few years, so I'm not sure if they're required to mark whether it's naturally decaffeinated or not. But our store only has naturally decaffeinated teas, so I do know that much. Yes.
When you were making your sample and giving it around, were you saying gun or gum?
Gun.
G-U-N.
G-U-N, yes. Yes, so it's gunpowder, and the reason why it's called gunpowder is because, as you could tell, it looks like little pellets that you would use in like a cannon or something. That's kind of where it got its name. Anyway, yes?
My mother used to brew tea by making very strong tea and holding it, and then she would put that in with some boiling water and just kind of make a tea. Is that kind of an unusual thing, or does that affect the taste, do you think?
Yeah. So just in case you didn't hear her, she was saying how her mom would boil water and put a very strong tea in it and then let it just sit in that, right? So that's kind of what a lot of Americans do, and a lot of British. That's just kind of what they've learned to do, and it's not. To me, like, I almost kind of cringe, like putting putting tea in boiling water. But I mean, there are. If people like it, you know, I mean, it's all left up to preference and to taste. But it does affect the taste putting it in boiling water, and then of course the amount of time you leave it in there affects the taste as well. So yeah. That would affect the taste to some level, but then again, like I said, it's all preference. Yes.
I gotta ask this already, but again, tea bags.
Yes.
Can that be quality tea? Is it used there very much in, say, like in England?
Yes. Yeah. So actually, come to find out, since I've worked at the tea store, we've had very many people come through our store from all over Europe, which tea is probably the #1 beverage in Europe. And I've learned that before learning this, I always viewed Europeans as really knowing a lot about tea and how to prepare it and stuff like that. And honestly, as far as knowledge goes, they know about it as much as like the average American does about tea. They just drink it all the time. Now, when it comes to tea bags, there are some teas that are bagged that can be of a high quality, but all tea bags, all the tea that are packaged in tea bags go through a process called CTC, which is cut, tear, and curl. And what that is it's a very cheap and quick way to process the tea leaves. And really what it does is it just kind of tears it all apart into little pellets, into little pieces. And it really, you don't get as much nutrients and as much antioxidants that way because it's ripping these tea leaves apart. And it's a very, very harsh process. So whenever you're making tea bags, you're not getting as much of the antioxidants, as much as the flavonoids and so on and so forth. So, yes?
Could you explain what is oolong?
Oolong, that's a good question. So oolong is another type of tea, just like black tea and green tea. It's actually an in-between from black tea and green tea. And when I say that, it's all about that oxidation level. And so they oxidize it just enough for it to be an oolong. If you go too far, it's black. If you don't do it enough, it's green. And so that's what an oolong is at the basic level. There are different types of oolongs, and there's a lot that goes into the process of making oolongs, so that would take a long time to explain all that. But yeah, that's what an oolong is at the base of it. Any other questions? I'll take one more before I make this kind of tea. All right.
What do you think of the British habit, and I speak from a long time friendship with a Brit, who makes her tea really strong and then pours in milk and sugar. And I like it black, but not hers.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, so what do I think of the kind of the British
Milk
way?
and sugar.
Yeah, the British way of adding milk and sugar onto really strong tea. I think that's fine. In fact, there's some teas that I do that with, depending on just my mood. It's just, there's no perfect way of making tea. There's no exact way as far as individual preference goes. Because some people do like it really, really strong and maybe a little bitter with lots of cream and sugar in it. And that's, so there's some teas that I've seen people do that too that I've cringed about. But I mean, like I said, I think that's a good thing.
Do you by any chance know what the main preference? I know what it is in the Orient. They don't put anything.
Yeah.
But as far as Europeans, it's toss up between milk, cream and milk, or sugar and lemon.
As far as I know, most Western Europeans like cream and sugar in their tea, and then it seems like most Eastern Europeans just like plain black tea. That's it. So that's what I've noticed. But anyway, so here we have this all ready. So it's at 175 degrees. I'm going to get my timer ready.
And you can warm the pot beforehand.
My mother always did that.
Yes, I did not warm the pot, but that's once again kind of a preference thing.
Plastic.
Yeah. Now this one's plastic, but I mean, you don't have to. You can. If anybody would like to, while it's steeping, come up and kind of look at it. The leaves opening up. Feel free. And then if anybody else has any more questions, yes.
What is chai? CHAI? Is that a tea?
Yes, so that's a good question. So is chai a tea? So chai literally means tea. That's the Indian word for tea. And so it's funny because I had an Indian friend tell me that, and he says it always sounds really funny to me because Americans are saying, I'd like a tea. So chai is just what Indians call tea. In America, what it's kind of become now, when you use the word chai, is it kind of more refers to a blend of tea with lots of spices. And so that's kind of what it's become over time. But yeah, chai just means tea. Any other questions?
We talked about preheating the pot.
Mm-hmm.
what difference does that make, whether you do or don't?
Warming the pot before you steep the tea in. Probably the biggest difference is obviously if it's cool and you pour hot water in there, it's going to cool the water down. You know, it's going to reach that equilibrium. So that would be the only advantage you have to adding hot water beforehand.
So you have less flavor then?
It would depend on how cool the pot is, but I mean, the things I have up here are room temperature, and so pouring the tea to let it steep in that won't really affect it much at all.
Put a tea cozy on it.
Tea cup, that's right, that's right. Okay. All right, perfect. So our tea is done. No. And so this is a kind of a cool device. You just set it on top of your cup and it drains right out the bottom. It's really, really nice. So. Is there a spoon or something I could get to stir this? All right, so I added some water because I made a concentrate in this. This only holds 16 ounces of fluid, and then this is a 32-ounce pot. So I put enough tea in here for 32 ounces, but only steeped it in 16 ounces of water, if that makes sense. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the wet leaves now and pass that around so you can kind of see the difference that we had.
You guys use something similar to like fair trade
We do. We actually do, yeah. So we, as Savoy Tea Company, we have built relationships with small importers, all of which have actually grown up working on tea farms, and they all buy tea from farms that treat their employees well and pay them well. So that's a good question. All right, so let me take some of these leaves. And this is kind of cool because you can see, you know, what the process of steeping it does. Feel free to open it and touch it. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Now here's a really cool thing too to think about as well. Tea is the only thing, the only food, really the only product out there that returns to its original state after consumption. So you have this leaf that grows on this plant, and then you pick it, you process it, you steep it, and then after steeping it, it's back to a leaf again. So that's kind of an interesting thing as well that goes along with tea. But anyway, so if everyone would like to come up and try this tea, you most certainly can. It has no sugar in it at all. Yeah, no sugar. Yeah, it's very sweet, and that's due to the cinnamon oil that's in it. So. The tea you're all drinking now is called cinnamon orange. Okay, so does anybody else have any more questions before we kind of wrap up? Well, thank you to everyone for coming out today, and thank you to the library and to Leslie for inviting me. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad you guys all enjoyed your tea.